probably not broken. Probably.
It's facing down. We'll turn kind of to me like maybe Jonah.
Or would you like it?
We just need it. He had it clipped on, so it's rotated so it's flipped down.
Okay.
To my beard.
Oh, that would be fun. Let's see here. Let's put it. Oh, I can't even see it. Oh,
It should rotate on the clip.
Rolled it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take this out of you.
Snapped it in half. Oh.
I'm not. I don't want to break this thing.
All right, good enough. Here you go.
Let's give it to her. I'll let you break it.
Yeah.
It just needs to go 180 degrees.
Yep.
Oh, I see. Well, that's exciting.
There you go.
That was a lot easier
Yeah.
than I thought.
It's just if you turn one way, it doesn't go quite as easily as the other way, but it should be fine.
How does that?
That looks good. Yeah.
Okay. It's my new look.
Awesome. So I'm gonna run back there so don't start taking your coat.
Yeah.
Hi everybody. I think most of you guys heard the first announcement. For anyone else who's just filing in, we do ask you to please put your phones on silent or turn them off, just so we don't have any interruptions during the panel. Pictures are fine, but please don't use flash. Please no actual
Art, what are you
video
working on
recording
right
or anything
this
like that. We are
second?
live streaming and recording
Doing
this
some
on the internet,
just
so
covers,
if there's
just
something
covers
cool
for a new series, a mini series called Original Sin,
Right.
which I know next to nothing about besides what I'm drawing on the covers.
Which is probably how they want it to be, very specific. That's interesting. Hold on, that actually inspires a good question.
Haha.
And I think we're going to start there.
All right. Ooh,
Anything you really want to talk about?
I should have. No.
Okay.
No. No, I was actually. I didn't actually even know I was on a panel until a little while ago.
You think? Ed McGinnis came in here and he's like, oh, I didn't know I was doing this. I'm very nervous. And I hate doing panels. Like, I'll take care of it.
Yeah. No, no. It's. I just never have. Ooh.
You can all hear us now.
We have to stop talking about them. Oh, we should turn this off like everybody else.
Okay. Are you ready?
No.
No. Should we wait another 5 minutes? Just make them let us watch us?
Let's wait 45. No.
Welcome to the Secret Origins Room at Emerald City Comic Con. I'm Jonah Weiland from Comic Book Resources. And it is my distinct pleasure to interview this man. He is a living legend in comics. He's one of comics' greatest artists of all time.
Very true.
That's true. Mr. Arthur Adams, nice to meet you.
Likewise, very nice to meet you as well. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You know, right before we started, I asked you, very briefly, like, what are you working on right now? And you said, I'm doing some original Sin covers for Marvel, and I have no idea what's happening.
Not at all. There's a bunch of superheroes on the cover, and it seems like if it's called Original Sin, they should be in various states of
Sin?
sin. Exactly. That's or at least undress or something.
Sure. But that inspired my first question. You've been in this industry, gosh,
31 years.
Right.
In actually this month.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you very much.
And in that time, you've seen the comics industry change in a dramatic way. And here you are, you're doing a cover for a series.
You say that, but you have to remember, mostly I've just been in my room at home. So
Sure.
saying I saw the industry change, it was from my room. So.
But your experience with working with Marvel, I'm sure the way they work with you is different. In the old days, it was a little bit more freewheeling. Today, it's non-disclosure agreements and all that kind of stuff. Talk about those changes, and are they for better or for worse, or just change?
It is different. It's. I have, of course, a completely different perspective on it now because when I first started, I was super eager to be doing what I'd wanted to do since I was 3 years old. So I was, when they asked me to draw Spider-Man, I was just like, yay, I'm drawing Spider-Man. Or when they asked me to draw Wolverine, I was like, awesome, Wolverine, what's that? Because at the time, that was just when X-Men was starting to get big. Was when I started. So of course after working for about a decade, I thought, found out a little bit more about the business practices. And when I got hired at the time, everyone was, even if they were just a year or two older than me or just started a year or two before me, those were the old guys. Those are the guys who knew how things were done. And now 31 years later, I still feel that way about almost everyone. Everyone else knows how things are done.
Sure.
But what it means is that most of the people I work with now are much younger, but fortunately they're in the offices making things run.
You're in a very interesting position in this industry as an artist who's worked here for 31 years. You are extremely influential of many of today's top artists.
That's very
You're still
true.
one of today's top artists. Yes. Does that role make you uncomfortable at all? Because I know there's a lot of guys who just worship you.
Honestly, I don't really think about it that much because there's still people I worship that from when I started, like Walter Simonson or Michael Golden or Barry Windsor Smith and lots of other guys. It's too many to name, really. And those guys are all still working, so I still think of those guys as my role models, and I don't even, it doesn't feel like I've been doing this as long as I have. The only time I realize that I'm older is when I look in the mirror. Other times I'm just sitting at my table and I feel like I'm 13 and wonder where the belly came from.
One of the things that I think surprised me the most when I was prepping for this interview, the Eisner Awards are considered kind of the Academy Awards of the comic book field. And you've won one, and it was for your Gumby Summer Fun Special in 1988. Not for any of your amazing monster work or your superhero work, a Gumby book.
And I think it was mostly because Bob Burden wrote that one, too.
Which you insisted on, didn't you?
Absolutely, I did, in fact. But, you know, I went to the Eisner Awards a couple of times, and a couple other awards things that were held in San Diego very early on in my career, because I thought that would be the thing that everyone does. And I quickly found out that almost nobody does that the food is terrible, and there's really no reason to go.
And it's 3.5 hours long.
It's 3.5 hours, and when you're in San Diego, it's work. So, you know, if you have 3 hours that you can do something else, I anyway choose to do something else.
Sure. Did that award mean something to you, or?
Oh, of course, it was great because it was a funny book to work on. It was great to work with Bob. He's still a friend, one of my most insane friends, as you might imagine if you've ever read that book or read the book that he created and drew, Flaming Carrot.
Sure.
But no, I don't really think of the awards as a friend of mine who does a lot of popular comics says, would you rather get awards or get bigger paychecks? And of course, I'd like the bigger paycheck.
Sure, sure. You had. I know you're a lifelong monster fan. You love those amazing B movies, the Universal B movies, and you just got the chance to draw Godzilla again.
I did.
It just
yes.
came out this last week. You did a cover for the prequel comic. Talk about your love of Godzilla and being able to come back to it again after all these years.
You know, I've never really felt I've stepped away because when I'm at home, I'll still doodle Godzilla all the time, and I have the movies on hand. Gosh, it's one of my ex-girlfriends. We were walking along after I'd just gone to a model shop and spent thousands of dollars that I shouldn't have spent on the newest Godzilla models, and she looked at me very sadly and said, "You love Godzilla more than you love me." And I knew that she was reaching out, but all I could think of was, I've known Godzilla longer. So I like Godzilla. I don't. It's just part of my childhood, and so much of the things that continue to inspire me in my work are the things that I loved when I was very young.
There's no competing with Godzilla with you.
Nor should there have to be.
We're going to do this. We're going to have some questions now. We're going to come back to more questions here. So if anybody's got some questions, let's go ahead and right there, sir.
One of my favorite works that you've done is the film adaptation of The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Obviously, you're inspired by, I would think, the design of that monster.
Oh, it's one of the best monster suits of all time.
Awesome. Can you talk about your love of the Gill Man?
He wants to know a little bit more about your love of The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
The Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's I think probably one of the top 3 guys in a monster suit of all time. It's that one and probably Alien. And some of the Godzilla suits are pretty good. It started my policy of only being willing to do movie adaptations that are at least 50 years old. So I think that's a very good policy. I worked very hard on that book trying to make a bunch of the characters look like the actors. And after I'd almost finished penciling the book, Dark Horse sent in pages and said they're thrilled because we don't have permission to use any of their likenesses, and none of them look anything like the actors. So that was nice.
Any other questions? I wanted to start. My first introduction to your work, believe it or not, was your cover work on 1985's Heroes for Hope Famine Relief cover.
That was one of my earliest ones, yeah.
Which led to actually a pretty, kind of, one of the bigger moments in your career, because it led to the production of that now iconic shot of Wolverine that you did, where
Sure.
he's coming at the audience with his claws out like that.
Yeah.
That was turned into standees. I've seen it
All over the
everywhere.
place, yeah.
And that was when I was getting into comics.
Sure.
What did that mean to you, that image became so iconic so quickly?
This is a little bit of what we were talking about before about paychecks and awards. that one made me pretty much the most money on any single one drawing for publication, because they originally hired me to do the poster, and then someone in licensing saw it and had another poster made that they weren't supposed to do, so I was paid twice. This is the kind of thing you remember.
That doesn't suck.
No, it's like, oh, you printed it twice. Oh, well, okay. Just send me some. And also, they sent me a lot of extra money, so that was very good. That was a funny one because, I mean, Paul Smith kind of was supposed to have done that one because I was asked by Ann Nocenti to kind of repeat what he had done on a cover. I can't remember which issue of X-Men, but it's one where Wolverine's running forward and Rogue is running behind him, and it's a black background. And so she asked for the Heroes for Hope book, please make the Wolverine kind of like that, not exactly like that, but use that as your jumping off point. And then the poster was basically, please make this kind of like the version on Heroes for Hope. So I probably owe Paul Smith a little bit.
Wow. When I first became a fan of yours, though, because I came into comics like so many through superhero comics,
Sure.
was your 3-issue run on Fantastic Four.
Oh, that was a lot of fun.
Talk about those days, because that was a really fun series. You working with great iconic characters that weren't the Fantastic Four.
No, I was working with Walter, who's one of my artistic heroes and also a fantastic human being. So that was just awesome. It was pretty funny because he called up and said, I'm really behind on my deadlines. Can you draw 3 issues, and during which time I will work on my next 3 issues so I can get caught up. And so I don't think I said, but you're calling me to catch up on your deadlines, which is already kind of a funny idea, but okay. Then he said he'd gone to the marketing department, because Walter's a smart guy, went to the marketing department, asked who the top 4 characters were at Marvel, the top best-selling characters, and it was Wolverine, and Ghost Rider, and Spider-Man, and the Punisher. And I said, I don't really like the Punisher. I don't want to draw the Punisher, and I hate drawing guns. That's because I'm not very good at it. Can we make him the Hulk instead? I said, oh yeah, that's a very good idea. So he asked what I wanted to draw, which is always a mistake because it's the Fantastic Four, and I love almost everything about the Fantastic Four. I said, oh, I don't know, Mole Man, Skrulls, the Submariner,
Sure.
I don't know, whatever you want. So he put it all in the first issue. What I remember is that issue, I was supposed to draw it in about 4 weeks to be on deadline. It took 5 weeks. And so the next issue was a little bit later, so I did that one in 4 weeks, which meant it was still a week late.
Right.
So the next issue was like going to print almost right away. So I did that one in 3 weeks, which is I was pretty proud of myself. It'd be a rush for most folk. So it all got done, and it sold pretty well. And then I asked Walter how if he was all caught up, and he had not worked on a single page during those whole 3 months. He said, I was just having fun writing this one, and I was just doing some other stuff on the side, so I'm still really late. Oh, okay, good job, Walter.
When you look back at those 3 issues, are you still proud of them, or do you nitpick
Oh, there
them?
were 3 of them. Well, there's things I look at them now, and I think I could draw them better, but I think that about almost everything I've ever done. I mean, the creature, I'm glad people like it, but when I look at that, I go, oh my goodness, I don't know why I drew heads that way. The faces seem too big for their heads. I went through an odd phase in the 90s. So almost everything I think I could do better now, but that would be silly.
Let's go back even earlier. Your first major comics project with Ann Nocenti, Longshot.
Yeah.
As I was reading about that seemed to be, and maybe it's just what has been documented online, it seemed to be one of the biggest learning experiences of your early career.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And you sat down with Jim Shooter, and he walked you through storytelling. You had so many mentors for that
Very
project.
quickly. Well, I was very fortunate when I started doing that. Ann had been shopping around Longshot. I mean, at Marvel, and by shopping, I mean showing it, asking various artists to draw it. And pretty much everyone had said no. So I was literally the bottom of the barrel, and I said yes because I was 19 and I wanted to draw comics. So I would have said yes to pretty much anything if they'd offered me, whatever thing I would not have liked at that time. If they'd offered it to me, I would have taken it. So fortunately, Louise Simonson, who was my editor on that series, was great friends with Ann. They shared an office. so they were really good friends. She was just on the verge of retiring as an editor, so she was going to continue to edit the book as a freelancer, which is, for pretty much any comic book company, is the worst idea in the world for getting a book done, because she's a freelancer. She and an editor. What does she have? She just is responsible for occasionally calling somebody and saying, "Are you working on that? Maybe you should work on it." So I ended up working on the book for 8 months. I drew the first half of the book, and Louise and a fellow who used to work at Marvel named Elliot Brown went all through my layouts for the first half of the book, and I was drawing pages that had 30 panels on them. They were just ridiculous. They would never have worked. So they showed me how to, like, well, you can do maybe 3 things happening in one panel instead of focusing on every single thing. And then at that, it would have been 1983, I went to that year's San Diego convention, and Jim Shooter carried up a rolled up reprint of Jack Kirby, I think it was Captain America. And he just sat me down and he just looked at the pages and said, okay, you see how this is laid out, and you see how this progresses to this, progresses to this. And he talked to me for maybe 5 minutes and was like, oh, okay, that all makes sense now. I mean, I thought I knew how to do it because I'd been studying comics, my whole life, but finally realized, okay, it's not that it's magic, but it's also not that. You have to remember that the audience doesn't know what you as the author or the artist knows. You just have to make things very clear and relatively orderly.
Do you like playing that mentor role with younger
I'm
artists today?
terrible at it.
Really?
I'm completely terrible at any sort of mentoring. My wife Joyce Chin is so much better at giving people advice and helping them know the things they need to know. So much of what I've done has been so instinctual since then. I mean, that was a 5-minute talk, but mostly, I guess it just stuck in the visual part of my mind,
Sure.
so I can't really clearly explain it. But people ask, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I go, well, I have a pencil and a pen and some paper, and I do it. That's pretty much my process.
It sounds like you really kind of try to get out of your own way. You don't try to think,
Oh,
overthink
if only
it.
that was true.
Oh, really?
I'm sure I overthink things like crazy. Oh, no, I'm constantly erasing and fixing things and moving things a little bit, and it drives Joyce nuts. She'll come in and look at something in the morning, say, oh, that looks good, that should be done today, and at the end of the day, it's all erased. She doesn't realize I've drawn it 4 other times between the morning. And
Sure.
so, no, I'm always trying to, get things as close as they are in my mind.
Every artist I talk to, in some ways, they're their own worst enemy. They're incredibly critical of their own work. They're never satisfied. And that's part of what guides your drive.
Sure.
But that being said, when you look back on all the work you've done, your cover work, your interior work, are there moments when you say, man, I just nailed that project, or I nailed that cover?
I'm sure there must be. More recently, there's some things I think I've done okay. Like some of the Secret Avengers covers I did, I thought it came out pretty good. Gosh, it's hard to think right now. I kind of liked the Godzilla cover I just did. Gosh, what else would be out now that so I don't really think that much about things I've done recently. Mostly I just set them aside, and I have so much stuff to do at home that I just kind of get on to the next thing. Yeah.
We can take some questions now if you got some. Anybody out there got a question for Art? Go ahead.
Like outside of comic book work, do you do other artwork for yourself?
Not so much for myself. Joyce and I realized about a decade ago that we couldn't afford my work anymore. So I generally just do the work that I'm hired to do, or I'll take commissions. Occasionally I'll do some stuff, but it's usually with the intent of finding a home for those pieces. I've done a little bit of development stuff for movies, but nothing that I can show anybody. And I've done a little bit of toy design, just enough to tell the IRS I do toy design, and that's why I have all these toys.
A legit write-off, yes?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, you also did, and I saw 2 different places on the internet where they talked about this, and maybe you did both, maybe you didn't. You did an X-Men themed Campbell soup can and an X-Men themed Chef Boyardee can?
I did, yes.
You did both?
One of my proudest moments. But because I figured that when people ask, because I would wander around my old neighborhood in Portland at any hour of the day or night, because I was single at the time and a freelancer, so there'd be days I was waking up at 4 a.m. or days I was going to bed at 4, I would just travel around the clock.
Sure.
My schedule didn't make any sense, so people could see me at any time. So if anyone would ask, what do you do? I could go, well, just go to the crappy pasta aisle. And that's what I do. Unfortunately, they didn't keep that on the shelves for very long. I don't even think it was a whole year. They had mine there for a few months, and then they got someone else to do versions based more on the cartoons, I think.
Okay.
I think they probably just wanted to be more cartoon friendly because the cartoon was out then. And it was weird looking at the pasta when I would open up a can and go, hey, I can actually tell that's Wolverine. That's insane. Just a couple of strokes of crappy pasta make Wolverine. Who knew?
Do you still have cans like in your studio
Oh
somewhere?
yeah, well they're in the garage, and I'm sure they're dangerous.
Well, I wouldn't open them, just have them on display.
No, I haven't checked to see if they've swollen or anything. But I'm afraid to know.
Let's go. The other time I really became a big fan of your work was during the Legend Imprint days. And that was an interesting time because comics were going through a huge shift. Image was being created.
I mean, think about it. Since then, how many new characters have been created for Marvel or DC? Very, very few.
That's very true.
Yeah.
That's very true. Well, talk about your own time and getting that imprint set up at Dark Horse and the risks you took in doing that, because you really changed. That was a real big shift in your
I've
career.
had a really charmed career. Almost nothing has been a risk. It's all, when Dark Horse asked us to do it, we were able to set up a really good deal between Legend and Dark Horse. That was, I think, good for both sides. And really, Frank Miller and John Byrne had already been working with Dark Horse, so they pretty much had a
paved the
deal
way for
set
you,
up.
yeah.
Oh yeah, so it was really easy. Basically, they just asked a bunch of us if we wanted to do more stuff. I think I was asked around the same time. Some of the Image guys asked if I wanted
Eric
to do
asked you,
something.
yeah.
Eric did, and several of the other guys.
Okay.
And then some people at Dark Horse, and I just kind of knew the guys who were at Dark Horse better at that time. So I said, well, I'll just hang out with my pals because that's the place to be.
That's more fun.
Yeah, and so it's one of those times I wish I'd, in hindsight, I would have done a lot more of my own creator-owned stuff. But at the time, I think one of the problems with my career is I have a hard time saying no when people ask me to do covers for things. I'm just like, oh, that sounds cool. I've never drawn that before. Or, oh, yeah, I've never been happy with the way I've drawn Batman or Superman or whatever. I'll give that another try. And so my own thing kind of just keeps getting put on the shelf.
Which superhero do you like drawing the best?
You know, I made a conscious effort very early in my career not to pick a favorite because I was sure that if I did, I would be asked to draw that for the rest of my life, and I'd become terribly, terribly bored. I know better now, so I probably, but I don't have a favorite is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah? Interesting.
No. I loved Batman when I was very, very young, the Adam West TV show and all that sort of stuff, but I've never been comfortable. I've never been happy with my Batman. I think mostly because it's such a big part of my childhood.
The detail in your artwork necessarily slows you down a bit. You're not the fastest artist in the world.
Not always. I just did some pages for the X-Men book. The editor was in the process of changing his series. He was the X-Men editor. Now he's becoming the Spider-Man editor. And so
That's
he was
Nick
working
Lowe?
on Nick Lowe. Exactly. He was a very nice young man. Unfortunately, he's been very nice to me because he had offered me these three pages, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago, and I said, sure, that'll be great. And then I was just about to go to a convention in London, and he called 2 days before and said, hey, how are those pages coming? I said, oh, crap, I totally forgot those pages. Look, I'm just going to be in London for a week. As soon as I get back, I'll knock them out and get them to you. He said, oh, that would be great, except the book goes to press this Friday. So I did 3 pages in 36 hours. I mean, fortunately, it was just a monster fighting dinosaurs. So
Okay.
if it looks wrong, no one knows, right?
Do sometimes those quick deadlines actually help in some ways?
Oh,
on
it helps a
your
great
art?
deal. It helps a great deal. It just makes it a lot easier to focus.
It really forces you to get out.
Oh yeah, that's when I did some issues of The Authority. When I offered to help do that, there was a script ready, and I said, look, just let me do it. Just give it to me now. I'll get it done in a month. And then DC found out I was doing it and said, no, we're going to postpone it and resolicit it so that we can, you can have lots of time to work on it. I was like, no, don't give me lots of time to work on it because I'll take lots of time to work on it. I don't want to. I just want to get, just bang it out, get it done. But the writer, Mark Miller, was very sick at the time, so it was hard to get scripts from him. So, so what I'm trying to say is, a shorter deadline is better for me.
you're known mostly for your cover work now because that's primarily what you do.
Sure.
Do you miss being able to do sequential work?
I really like doing the sequential work, and I do miss it on one level, but just financially, it's a lot more lucrative to do covers right now. If I was going to do more interior work, I think I'd probably like it to be more my own stuff. Not that I'm not open to ideas. I almost did an annual for Marvel last year, but I was having back issues, so I just couldn't do it. But I'm feeling better now, so if they ask, I'd be tempted.
If you did,
As I said, I have problems saying no to jobs. So.
Sure. If you did more creator-owned work, would you return to something like Monkeyman O'Brien?
It would probably be Monkeyman. I have ideas for other things
Yeah.
that I'm not going to tell you about.
Tease. Do you have the same confidence in your writing as you do with your art?
Oh no, no. Actually, yes. If by that you mean no confidence whatsoever, then yes, I'm completely out of level on that. Yes, probably less confidence in my writing.
But with writing comes a very different skill set. Oftentimes, there's a lot of research involved. Although with your style,
Yeah, I
of
don't mind. I don't
storytelling-
mind the research. I think I can do the research part just fine, and I think I'm pretty good at dialogue, at kind of a light style of dialogue. I just don't think plotting is my strong point. I come up with kind of little vignettes, little scenes, but I think my weak point is connecting it all up into a nice big story.
Okay. We can take some questions right now. Go ahead. You.
Yeah, actually, I'm curious, as far as Longshot, did you base the design on anyone in particular?
I don't.
Let me repeat. The question
yes.
is, did you base the design of Longshot on anyone in particular?
I don't recall facially having based him on anybody. His hair was based on the lead singer of La Caja Gugu, yes, from very, very long ago. I think, everyone knows who they are now. They've become so big. But basically, when I was designing Longshot, I just got out all my superhero comics and tried to design someone who, at least for that time, did not look like anybody else, just so that his silhouette would be different from everyone else. And if you drew him next to anybody, you would know, okay, that's not that other guy. Yeah, it's not. He doesn't have black hair. He doesn't have any squid. He just looks different than everyone else.
There's another question right here.
Yeah, I was just going to ask questions about story as well. First, maybe I'll just say, huge fan.
Thank you so much.
Particularly what jumps to my mind is the Asgard X-Men crossover business as well. But you kind of jumped on the question about writing, but I was going to ask if there was much in the way of collaboration with the writers, or maybe you could talk a little bit about how that works in terms of telling the story. How much of it is kind of directed by writers, or how much of it is your own choices?
Questions about the relationship you have with your writers and how collaborative it is generally.
And it varies from writer to writer. When I was working with Chris on as we did more and more annuals, I would often write suggested dialogue on the side in the gutters and the sides of the page, and Chris would call me up and say, "Do more of that. You're funny. I'm not funny," which I always remind him about. And then some writers like Alan Moore, who I haven't worked with a great deal, but the few things I worked on, he would say in lots and lots of pages how flexible he was if I could come up with a different way to do a page that he was asking for. He was completely open to that. And then I would read his pages, which were very well, just verbally laid out. And inevitably, his was the perfect way to do the page, which was very irritating. And just these 3 pages with Mr. Bendis. Basically, he offered a suggestion of what the pages were going to be, and then I just kind of did my own version of that. So really, it depends. But most of my jobs have been quite collaborative. With Anne Nesenti, it was very collaborative. There's been very few times I've worked full script, so there's always something of me in.
Can you remember an example of one of those full script?
The only one that occurs to me right now is Alan Moore's are full script. Steve Moore's were full script, but I still couldn't help myself. I changed those still quite a lot. And Bruce Jones, who I did a very short story with very early in my career, that was a full script.
Okay.
I think pretty much all the rest have been I guess the Authority were kind of full script, but I also on those I still took some license.
Sure, sure. I saw a question. Go ahead, sir.
I had a question about the level of detail edits that you're forced to make. If you ever do anything digitally to try to...
No, and it's not that I'm opposed to doing anything digitally. I just don't know how. Basically, I have my paper and pencil and pens, and then just I do my part there, and sometimes the colorist will try different things. But no, I don't really do anything digitally.
There was another. Go ahead.
I was kind of shocked when you said that people turned down Longshot for you. I would just always think people would be clamoring for work. And you say
Well,
you
if you well, do you need to?
I asked why so many people turned down Longshot, and you
Or
think,
any work.
or any work, yeah.
Well, at that particular time, most of the people who were doing comics were far more professional than I ever was. They were doing a book or two a month, and Anne's idea for Longshot and her first script was insane. It was, and you described Longshot. He's an alien from another planet whose power is that he's very lucky. Like, how do you draw a guy being lucky? It doesn't really make any sense. You know, you find out ways story-wise, and you know, I think we're able to do something with that. And I thought he was a charming character. But most of the other people just had a lot of other work to do, and it's easier to just, you know, and by just, I'm in no way saying anything bad about anybody, but it's easier to draw Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four characters you've been drawing for years. And she was offering this to everybody, like he was offering it to John Buscema, and you know, John Buscema would rather go draw Conan. He doesn't care about the lucky superhero that Anne just made up.
You know, I think it comes as no surprise to anybody that as a young kid you were also drawn to become, you wanted to become a paleontologist.
I did.
And your reason for not, I loved your reason for not doing it is because you didn't like the extreme climates that you'd have to go to.
No, I thought, because I would just buy, you know, dinosaur books, and there was a lot fewer when I was a kid than there are now.
Yeah.
And I would just get them to draw the copy of the pictures of the dinosaurs, and I thought, well, paleontologist. Sometimes it would say even in the captions on the side, the reconstruction by so and so. So I thought paleontologists just drew dinosaurs, and like someone went and got the bones, brought them back to the museum, and they would, you know, figure out what goes where. I knew there was some science involved. I didn't know you actually had to go out in the desert and dig for them. That's an awful idea. Who wants to do that? I have very fair skin. It would be terrible.
Skin cancer is for real, man.
Yeah, exactly. I have a bald head. I didn't then, but you know, I'd have to wear a hat all the time. That would not be good.
Have you ever been on a dig, though?
No, I never have. I know Bill Stout has. He's a much more serious person than I am.
Yeah. Do you spend time at natural history museums and just
Oh, I
sit
do.
there and gawk?
Oh, yeah. I love going to the Natural History Museum. I was just at a convention in London last week, and I made sure we stayed a couple extra days so I could visit the Natural History Museum. They had some really nice, some nice dinosaurs.
Don't they have a fantastic one in Chicago?
I've not been. So
I think her name's
yeah.
Sue. Is it
Oh,
Sue
the
Vaxton?
Tyrannosaur. Is it in Chicago? It could be. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Interesting.
But it gives me a reason to go to Chicago now.
Well, there you go. I saw a question over here. Go ahead.
You don't have a favorite superhero to draw? Do you have a least favorite one to draw?
Do you have a least favorite superhero?
A
to
least
draw?
favorite one to draw. Yeah, you know, it's pretty much all just drawing. So there's some characters I don't get the appeal of. Like, I can kind of understand the appeal of the Punisher. I don't get Deadpool at all. If there's anyone who likes Deadpool, that's fine. There's lots of different characters because there's lots of different people, so that's cool. But I don't get Deadpool. He's the funny guy who murders people. It's just not my cup of tea. I'm sure there's others, but nothing occurs to me offhand besides those. My wife thought it was very funny when I did several Deadpool covers recently, and on each cover, Deadpool got a little smaller, which she thought was very funny.
A little passive-aggressive note about Deadpool there.
Basically, well, in the first one, I have him, an ice cream truck is being dropped on him. And the next one, he's about to be swallowed by a giant shark. He's very tiny. I like drawing the big shark.
Another question over here. Who inks you the best? Or who has inked you the best?
Besides myself, who I prefer to ink myself, and not because I think anyone else is less talented, just they don't know what's in my head. And sometimes when I pencil something, I don't know exactly how it's going to look when it's inked. So sometimes when I see things inked, I go, oh, that's not finished. Even the very best guys, I think, oh, that doesn't look finished to me. If I was going to do it, I would, because I finished the drawing as I'm inking it. But of the people who have inked me, I think Craig Russell did a really great job on those few covers that he did for Classic X-Men. And Terry Austin, of course, he's one of my big artistic influences very early on, so it was a thrill. It was a thrill every time I saw Terry inking my stuff. Al Milgram, actually, I thought did a really good job. He inked a fair portion of that, the third issue of that FF series. I've been very lucky with my inkers. I can't think of any that I thought were just horrible.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just maybe not knowing what's inside your own head there.
Exactly. Besides that, the things don't actually look finished to me. Aside from that.
Right. You talked earlier about you hate drawing guns. You're not the first artist who's told me that.
Sure.
What are the things you hate drawing, and that you make it a script? It's like, I'm going to find a way around that.
And it's not so much that it's a problem drawing mechanical things, but sometimes it's just I feel I've gotten over it recently. But it's just the process of drawing a mechanical thing inside an organic shape. So basically, just figuring out the hand's relationship with the gun, and then trying to make it look dramatic. The usual shot, down the barrel at the audience. For years would just drive me nuts. I just couldn't do it. And when you look at a photograph of someone holding a gun directly pointed at the camera, it looks like nothing. The gun looks really small, and it's just a kind of a hand waving around with a little, shape. And also, I just don't. As much as guns can do, they just don't look visually very interesting to me.
Right. That's an interesting point, because guns went from just being guns in comics to being these massive behemoth structures.
And that's partly why I think they could, just to make them visually more interesting. That's when I first started working on Monkeyman O'Brien. My original intention was that Monkeyman was going to carry a gun so big it would have wheels on it. So they could drive it sometimes, but...
See, now that's a really interesting point. I'd never thought about that before. So guns got so big to make them more visually interesting, but they basically got ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then you took that idea of ridiculousness and took it to a whole new level with Monkeyman and O'Brien.
Well, no, I was going to, and then I chickened out.
Oh, you chickened out.
So let's leave it there. No, I never really did that. But now maybe I will, just so that you don't look silly on the internet.
You're very sweet.
No, thank you.
Any other questions before we wrap up? Right there in the back.
When you're drawing, do you have a lot of photographic reference?
I do.
You use a lot of photographic reference.
I have a lot of I hope no one ever looks in my iPad, because there's a shocking amount of naked people in my iPad.
And you tell Joyce that's research.
It's like being a scientist. I have to have these things. Like being a doctor. It's all reference.
Do you do any modeling at all?
No, I'm not that good looking.
Do you use any models yourself?
No,
anybody in?
No, I'm also very shy, so I'm afraid to ask people to come to my house.
Okay. Any other questions before we wrap up here? One more in the back? Where'd you get your art training from?
Basically just sitting in my my room at home, living in my parents' house with lots of how to draw books, and then going to conventions and asking advice from people who are already professional. Especially when I first started, I was quite a know-it-all and really didn't want to hear that I didn't know it all. So, and school would have been, I come from a fairly big family, so school would have been pretty difficult. So basically, I just really, really wanted to do it and just concentrated like crazy on doing it.
If the internet is to be trusted, your first convention that you went to was at the age of 17. 19 was when you were first going out to get work.
Yeah.
So 17, that's 33 years ago. I'm sorry to age you there.
All right, I'm aging whether you say so or not.
In my lifetime, I'm not as old as you are, I've seen a dramatic change in the way these conventions are run, who comes, who doesn't.
Oh, definitely.
And the power of comics in pop culture.
Yeah.
Talk about your journey in comics as a comics fan from those early days and how it's changed. And is it all for the better? Is any of it?
You know, I've made a career of it, so I have nothing to complain about. I've done pretty well. And I certainly know lots of people who've done really well doing it.
Any stories?
I'm
from
happy to
those early
see
days?
from the early, not that it occurs to me offhand, but it's just I'm happy to see, like as my wife would say, in San Diego when she first started going, which wasn't all that long ago, probably about 15 years ago. In San Diego, the men's room was, I mean, this is kind of the life things you've noticed as you're going along. the men's room in San Diego was always a disaster and just grisly, and you just,
Yes.
like, if you could wait to go back to your hotel to do whatever you needed to do, that was a good idea.
Yeah.
And the women's room were empty because there was hardly any women going. So I'm thrilled that it's, I mean, out in the hall there, it looks like it's about 50-50 or in that area. So I'm hoping that the women's rooms are a disaster now. No, not at all.
The makeup of the cons, of the attendees, has changed a lot too. Because
You think so?
23 years ago when I went, it was primarily white males. And I don't see that as much anymore.
I suppose so, but that's kind of pretty much what's happening with America, right? And all
Yeah.
for the better, right?
Yeah.
And also, you know, what I would say for years, and it's still kind of true, is that especially San Diego, is that for the last 30 years I've been going almost every year, and basically it's all the same people. They're just always older and fatter. So I think it's partly the audience has aged. I don't know what the average comic book buying age is, but it's probably not 13. It's I think probably, I don't even know if it's in the teens at all. Is it all in the 20s? I'm not really sure. But it's partly that I think the people who are still fans of this stuff, you know, have jobs and have more money. So there's things are just kind of cooler. The things you can get are a lot more interesting. All the Bowen statues are those aren't cheap, and they're pretty cool. And all the collections they do nowadays, I would have, when I was getting into comics, if I wanted to see a back issue of something, you know, I just went to the spinner rack to see reprints of old Fantastic Four or of Spider-Man. And I mean, no one does reprints well, they do reprints, but now they cost $50, and they're in really nice books, and they sit on your shelf and look pretty nice.
Yeah. Art, has been an absolute pleasure. If we have any
You're
more
very
questions, we've
kind.
got time for one more. Right here.
How did your work with Alan Moore come about?
How did your work with Alan Moore come about?
The first time he was working on a book on which the artist was late, and they just needed a couple of pages to fill. It was on Tom Strong, and for a while they were running a little short mini story that kind of connected to the rest of the story. So he just asked if I would draw that, and you know, I was a fan of his writing, so you know, I was eager to do it and very pleased to do it. And then when I did a series called Johnny Future for ABC Comics, it was Alan and his friend Steve Moore came up with the character, and the character that they described was actually quite different than the one, at least visually. She looked quite different than what they asked for. She's much more organic. She's crazier looking than what they'd asked for. Although what they'd asked for was her to have a see-through shirt through the whole time, so that would have been kind of crazy too, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how I was going to draw that.
I have one more question for you. When you were first starting out, you lived with Mike Mignola and Steve Purcell.
I lived in the same apartment building. We didn't
Same
actually
apartment.
live in the same apartment,
Okay.
but we were all in the same apartment building.
Did you know, when you're young, you have dreams of greatness and all that kind of stuff, but did you have any sense that these two guys that you lived in the same building with, were so close to, would become the guys that they became?
You know, you make up a character called Hellboy, you're not going to get anywhere in business, right? It's just, you're doomed. Everyone told him, you're calling him Hellboy, you're doomed. This is never going to go anywhere. And it hasn't, really.
Right.
And then Steve Purcell, who's, Mike described this not so long ago, and I'm trying to remember exactly how he said it. It was Steve was the one who always had a girlfriend and never really worked. We never knew how he could afford his apartment, but he always had a girlfriend. Mike was always working and working really hard. I worked occasionally and got paid the most, so I was the one in charge of paying for most meals.
Okay.
But no, it's the weirdest thing. I mean, Steve Purcell has, did his series Sam and Max, his brilliant series at Sam and Max, and has gone on to do video games. Is now co-directed Brave for Pixar, and is now working on another project. I can't remember what's announced, so I'm not going to say what it is. And Mike's, the Hellboy machine just keeps on going, and
20 years, yeah.
it's pretty darn crazy. And I occasionally drive by that old apartment building and mostly realize what a crappy building it was.
But it was the birth of a lot of really great stuff.
It was amazing. It was unbelievable. And so many people came by there when we were living there. Jim Lee came by for a few days, and Dan Brereton used to hang out there occasionally, and there's others I'm forgetting.
One day we'll have to do like a national historic preservation of that building or something.
That would be a mistake.
Art, an absolute pleasure. Art Adams, everybody.
Thank you. Yay! Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, you're very nice to say so. Thank you. It was painless. Oh, who's next? Maybe I'll take that one. I'll ruin that one.
Oh, how dare you? I don't know who's next.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for coming by. Thank you again. Good luck with the rest of your. Oh, there you go. He's an asshole.
Thanks. It was a real pleasure meeting you.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
I asked that question to Scott Campbell, who likes to release draw.
Yeah.
His answer is iron,
Thank you so much.
because it's all straight lines.
That's interesting. I mean, he's coming up to later
Yeah, I
today.
know.
Well, thank you for that.
I probably
That's
won't ask that one from him if I already know the answer, but it's kind of one of those fun, it's an odd question. to
That's
ask.
great.
But yeah,
That's great. Thank you. I've got you. What's your name?
Tim.
Tim. I'm Jonah. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun question to ask the artist, like, what don't you like about it?
Oh,
I've never heard. Wait a minute.
I ask that often of artists. Keith Giffen gave me one of my favorite answers ever. He said, "I hate trying horses. I can't do the musculature. They're just bastards." That's exactly what he said. Iron Man. Well, thank you, Tim.
Yeah, you bet.
Have a good day.
I got the right name up there, right?
Yeah. I'm just checking these water bottles. Both still good.
Awesome.
So they are short of candy ones right now, just a little bit, so.
You know, especially since we have 3 people in this room, I feel like we can handle almost everything, really.
throw it away. They use the Batman the outsider. Oh yeah, you think? Well,
The bulldog. I'm sorry, but.
Although, I mean, they're a hell of a lot better right now.
well,
My only following.
yeah, you see a lot. Certain things, or like
I was in Illinois.
Suicide Squad. Now, originally it was a picture of, I guess, a World War II military work, and then sort of like became like the super villain type of thing. And I guess they still takes me a while. Shade, everything easy with Shade, which is like me and my body, because Shade was originally like the Steve Ditko character. Shade changed it around, like 9 years ago. And then Vertical did a version of Shade. Because you never really got the sense of how they was for a lot of issues. And now it's got like they're keeping the name of it. Who on the copyright stuff is like horrible.
I'm watching the hockey for I enjoy things like
Why doesn't it? Okay, yeah. Well, it's kind of, I'm confused whether they use. Well, that was always a big problem. Well, even back in the 40s, they had Captain Marvel Jr. His word was Captain Marvel. So can I introduce himself? No.
coming. We'll get started in a moment. Peter's on the floor and on his way. It's very small rooms. If you have cell phones, if you could silence them, that would be fabulous. If you do leave during the panel, please make sure that the door doesn't slam, sort of gently close it. Still photography is fine, video photography or flash. And that's it. So thanks for coming. Hope you enjoy the show.